So it all started in my rhetorical theory class. We were learning about the power of rhetoric to persuade people through the way language is used. And through a bunch of random conversations between us and our professor, we found out that she, despite being someone who's pretty well versed in what young people are into, didn't know what the word bay meant. Eventually, I met with her after class and I was talking to her about what the word means and the two ways you can use it. You can either use it as an acronym or just, a slang word. Before I left, my professor recommended a TED Talk to me about language and the way words work. She told me that the woman who made this TED Talk is actually on this council of linguists who do a number of things like deciding the word of the year, what words are acceptable, what words go into dictionaries, that sort of thing. When she mentioned this, I immediately remembered the fact that I had once heard of this council and what they did. This council of linguists decides the word of the year, and I was interested in what they decided was the word of 2013. The word they decided on 2 years ago was because. But more specifically, because X. Now, when I initially brought this up to my professor, she was naturally confused. So, let's give an example. Why did they choose this word to be the word of 2013? Because reasons. Man, why was your weekend so bad? Because homework. A lot of people have heard of the way this word is used, and a lot of people nowadays use it in common speech. However, there was a student in the class listening to what we were saying, a few people that I knew. One of my friends started tuning into the conversation, was a little confused about what I was talking about. When I turned to them to kind of get a little backup on what I was saying, and I started saying, because reasons, etc., he wrote it off as a Reddit thing. Oh, that's a thing on Reddit. It's not really, a real word, just, internet slang, that sort of thing. So what he was effectively arguing was that because X shouldn't have been named an official word of 2013, because it's just an internet thing. I was actually, I was a little annoyed. Just Reddit slang? Just an internet thing? As I walked away, I realized that I'd been confronted with this idea that some people don't think the internet is a place where words are born. That if something comes off the internet, it's just slang. It's not actually a legit way of speaking. I think that's silly. Coincidentally, when I watched the TED Talk my professor recommended, it was called What Makes a Word Real? The TED Talk is by a professor of language named Anne Curzan. During the video, she brings up the fact that so many people want to put regulations on what makes a word, whether or not a word can be considered real, whether or not a word's usage can be considered proper. And one of the things I found most interesting about her talk is she brings up skeptical people. She brings up people who have a problem with the way words are used in a given age and time. She cites a few people from the 1800s who had a problem with words being used in a certain way that today, no one even questions. So you have these stiffs back in the 1800s and they have a problem with the way people were speaking, saying that it was a representation of the English language just decaying. But the English language is still here, and a lot of people in modern day don't have a problem with those words now. Instead, now they have problems with all new words that come from Reddit and the internet. Putting LOL in the dictionary represents Armageddon for the English language. All the children are texting nowadays and it's ruining our capacity for literacy. The thing is, we're fine. College students are still writing brilliant papers that use a dynamic range of vocabulary. Journalists are still writing fantastic articles for newspapers and magazines that capture the age of the times we live in. And though you're always going to have your exceptions, people can still speak to each other relatively well. We're not having a breakdown in communication and the language isn't getting any worse. Skeptics take on this Malthusian perspective about language that is just going to continue decaying until all of the beauty and complexity of English is going to be reduced down to some Neanderthalic, barbaric corruption of the language we speak today. But the thing I like to focus on is that they've always said that. Since people started caring about language as an art form and even a science, people have been complaining about the directions in which it's going. And yet, here we are. What do you think about language emerging from the internet? Do you think it can be considered real, or is it just fads that should be taken with a grain of salt because it comes from not necessarily scholarly databases and councils of linguists deciding whether or not those words count. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys again sometime.